It controls him. He is an untouchable. He cannot shout at anybody. Everything, it fascinates him. He was awestruck by looking into the temple. Sohini, his sister, was molested by a Pandit Kalinath. Many people chant the names of various deities and enter the temple. Hello everyone, this is Shobita S. Aradhya, lecturer, Department of English, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, MYSURU, a temple of excellence. A warm welcome to you all for today's session. And what are we going to discuss today? In the last session, we saw the novel Untouchable by Mulkraj Anand. B.C.A faces many insults. So what happens next? He comes out to his work and he continues his work. So what will happen next? Is he going to suffer few more insults, or is he going to be happy that day? So what is going to happen in that day's life of B.C.A? We'll see now. So let us start the Untouchable by Mulkraj Anand. So B.C.A, he leaves his house, he comes out and he reaches the temple. The temple was a colossal, huge turreted structure. It was a very big temple, and the massive stone and carved masonry was seen in the temple. He was always waiting to get into the temple. He wanted to see what is inside the temple, but getting into the temple was not allowed. These untouchable people, this caste people, were not allowed into the temple, because if they get into the temple, it was to defile the temple. So he comes there, he looks at the colossal, the huge turreted structure with what we call gopuram. A huge gopuram was there, and he could see the carved masonry. The carving of the wall of the temple was very beautiful, and the florid experience of whose detail and intricate decorations strikes a strong kind of awe into his being. So the huge temple, the carving on it, and the pillars, the gopuram, the whole temple, the big, beautiful masonry work, everything, it fascinates him. He was awestruck by looking into the temple. And many people chant the names of various deities and enter the temple. If it is a temple, we usually chant the name of that god or the deity. But here, people were chanting the names of the various deities, because it was the temple of Narayana. Narayana, we have seen that he has come in many incarnations. So people were chanting the name of Rama, Krishna, Narayana, all those. So he was in a confusion. Why are they calling different names? He wanted to see which god is placed inside. Which god's temple is this? So he was curious to know all this. He has a strong desire to weave inside the temple. So it was a desire to him to weave inside the temple, but he is not allowed the entrance. Why? Because his presence is believed to defile it. If an untouchable enters the temple, it is believed that the temple is defiled. If that happens, they have to do some rituals. They have to make the homa. So they were not allowed into the temple. But the cleaning of the courtyard of the temple was done by these people. Now B.C.A had the strong desire to get into the temple and have a glance of the temple inside. He, without any option, he wants to go, but he is not allowed. So he starts his work, that is to sweep the courtyard. His father had ordered him to go and do that work because he was not well that day. So he comes to the temple. The routine work is not to sweep the courtyard of the temple. But that day, as his father Lakha has ordered him to go and do that work. He comes here and he starts with his work to sweep the courtyard of the temple. The work of cleaning or sweeping the courtyard is strenuous. Definitely they have to bend, clean the dry leaf, dust, all the particles there. It is strenuous, but Baka says, but it is less tiring and contemptuous. Compared to cleaning the latrines, it is less tiring and contemptuous to Baka. So, though it is strenuous to sweep the courtyard, the huge courtyard of the temple, it is less tiring than cleaning the latrines to Baka. So, he starts doing his work, but he collects the rubbish and puts them aside and set them on fire. So, he cleans, sweeps all the courtyard, brings all the dried leaf on one side and the twigs to one side, and then he sets fire to that, so that they will not fly and go again to the courtyard. His temptation to weave the deities grows intense and stronger. It becomes more intense and stronger because he continuously hears the people chanting the names of the deities. So Rama, Narayana, Ramakrishna, they were singing, they were chanting the names. So that intense was growing to him, but he was not allowed. He is unable to resist it. He is not able to control himself. His mind, his wish is to get inside and have a look inside. He moves on and stumbles for a moment. With that great desire, he moves few steps, and after very few steps, he stumbles and he regains his balance. But soon he is close enough to peer inside the temple. So within few steps, he was very close to the temple, and from there he could peer, he could have the glance of the temple inside, but he was not allowed inside. So according to the Brahmins there, it was a belief that these untouchables have to be far from the temple for about 60 yards. So they say it is written in Vedas that untouchables should remain far from the temple for about 60 yards. I don't know why these rules were made, or even whether actually these rules were there in Vedas or don't know, but it has come in the practice. So he was not allowed into the temple. He was very close to the temple and now he could peer inside the temple. He sees two priests performing Hindu rituals. So when he peers inside, he sees two priests performing the Hindu rituals, and he sees that these two priests are half naked. You can see in temples, the priests who are performing the rituals in the temple, they wear only the dhoti and one stole on them. So he feels that they are half naked. Okay, and what he does, the awe is overwhelming when he looks at the temple inside and the priests performing rituals, and slightly he could see the idol of the god. He was awestruck. He felt overwhelming. It was the satisfactory vision to him. Here, one thing we should note is that though Baka was fascinated for the Western culture, he, because of the culture he was taught at home by his mother, he could not stop himself by being awestruck by the temple and the god inside, Hindu temple and the god inside. He did not like the people wearing heavy jewelry. Indians wear heavy jewelry made of silver also. That too, his caste people, they wear silver jewelry. He did not like that because he was fascinated by the Western culture. What they were wearing, the small jewelry, was more cute, beautiful for him than the Indian silver jewelry which his mother and sister wore. But here he could not stop himself. It was an overwhelming sight to him to see into the temple. Here, about this situation where Baka wants to get inside, see the temple, and he is not allowed. There are restrictions to enter the temple. Anand, Mulk Raj Anand, he portrays that Baka was profoundly moved. He was affected by the rhythm of the song. So, what is the rhythm of the song? Krishna Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. These are the names of gods called which were in rhythm. They were singing song, they were chanting in rhythm. So Baka, he was affected by the rhythm of the chanting of the god, and he was profoundly moved. He was very much interested to get inside. His blood coursed along the balanced melodic line to the final note of strength with such vigor that his hands joined unconsciously and his head hung in the worship of unknown god. So, Mulkraj Anand tells here that it was an unknown god. Definitely, Baka was not knowing which god is worshipped inside, but the melody of those lines chanted by the people inside and the atmosphere, the aura of the temple had made him very religious, and he unknowingly joins his hands and his head was hung in worship. So he unknowingly, without his concise, he had joined his hands and his head was hung in worshipping the god which he was not knowing. After that, there was a crowd and there was disturbance, there was shout, and again it was time for Baka to be insulted. What happened now? There was a halla balo. Halla balo means a disturbance, great disturbance. So, what happened? An outcry and halla balo raised, polluted, polluted, polluted. What was polluted, who polluted, how it got polluted, and who is this shouting the word polluted. So you might have a guess now. Yes, a priest shouts that polluted, 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 and he walks in the veranda of the temple. The commotion renders him completely unnerved. Baka had closed his eyes, joined his hands, and his head was hung. He was worshipping the god, and sudden shout of polluted, it makes him completely unnerved. With a shock, he opens his eyes. His eyes are covered with darkness. So when suddenly he opens, his eyes are covered with darkness. He is not able to see anything there because of the shock, and his tongue and throat are parched. His tongue and throat are drying. He is in a fear now. He wanted to drink water. He is in that pathetic condition. Why? Because since morning he has faced many insults. Some said he had touched one priest, and that priest made a great scene in the road, in the streets of market, and also everywhere when he walked, his father, he also did not listen to what Baka was trying to tell his father. So in all these, he had great insult that day. Now he thought one more has come to him. His tongue and throat are parched, and when his eyes are covered with darkness, he's in fear, complete fear. He wants to utter a cry of fear. So he wants to shout loudly in fear, but his concise fails him. It controls him. He is an untouchable. He cannot shout at anybody. So they must be always surrendered like person. So they cannot stand straight and shout what they want. They must be always as they are surrendered. So he opens his mouth wide to speak, but it is of no use. Even if he opens the mouth, he is not allowed to speak. The consequences may be more terrible if he opens his mouth. So he opens it wide, but it is of no use. Nobody hears his voice there. Beads of sweat covered his forehead. So he was sweating in fear. Beads of sweat, as if they are joined like beads. So the sweat was coming out of his forehead. He tries to raise himself from the awkward attitude of the prostration. Prostration means getting surrendered. He wants to raise against that prostration, but he is not supposed to do so. But his limbs have no strength left in them. His limbs were shivering. So fear had covered him totally. He wanted to raise his voice. He wanted to raise against those people, the high caste people, but his limbs were shivering. His throat and tongue had parched and his eyes were covered with darkness. So all his culture, what his father, mother had taught, that he must be bent in before the high caste people, that is not allowing him to raise his voice or revolt against those people. For a second, he was as if dead. So though he is thinking all these are in his mind, for a second, he was like a dead person. So what happened? Why was this voice polluted? Come there. What happens is, Sohini, his sister, was molested by a Pandit Kalinath. She was sweeping the courtyard on the other side. She was molested by a Pandit called Kalinath, Pandit Kalinath. And Sohini herself reports, she comes. What happens there? The scene, what it is there is, Sohini was sweeping. By that time, Pandit Kalinath, he comes from behind and holds her breast. Before she could shout, he himself comes shouting, polluted, polluted. He is trying to create a scene. He is defending himself and blaming Sohini that she touched him. So this was the scene created by Pandit Kalinath. Now Baka was in a confusion because he had peered the temple. He was almost at the entrance of the temples where he was not supposed to. He was in a confusion. Who has done? Whether it is my fault or is it anybody's fault? By that time, when the priest comes shouting, polluted, polluted, there he sees another figure behind him walking, and that was Sohini. So now he had a doubt. Baka has a doubt. Who had created this? Who had polluted the temple? Whether Baka or his sister Sohini. And then when I was bending, so she tells, when I was bending down to work, he came and held my breast. This is the complaint Sohini says, and this had happened to her by Pandit Kalinath. Though they call themselves the higher caste and all, they tell if these people touch, they get polluted. What is this then? When they are molesting a girl, what does their caste come middle? Won't they feel that they will be polluted if they touch this girl? No. Pandit Kalinath was a man of lust. He wanted to touch Sohini and feel it. So, Baka gets very much angry. He becomes angry like storm. His anger is compared to storm here. And he wanted to punish the Brahmin dog. But in the meantime, Sohini arrests his progress by dragging hard at the lapel of the overcoat. So here what happens? Baka want to punish that Brahmin for such a action what he has made. But Sohini stops him. So how she stops? It is not by words. She holds his lapels. Lapels means the collar which is extended to the coat. So she holds his lapel and drags him out, saying, I'm safe. Only that had happened. Okay. So if Sohini would have not stopped, that day Baka would have punished. Maybe he would have blown the Brahmin, or in anger he would have killed the Brahmin. But Sohini stops him by dragging his lapel and brings him out. And also here should see Baka's eyes. His eyes flared wild and red and his teeth ground to the challenge. I could show you what that Brahmin dog has done, but relaxes when he is assured by his sister that her modesty is not ravished. So here she tells he just touched and her modesty is not ravished. So he relaxes a bit when he hears this from his sister, but by then his eyes were wild and red and his teeth ground. He was biting his teeth very tightly in anger, and he was telling, I could show you what Brahmin dog has done. Means he wanted to reveal what that Brahmin has done. But Sohini condoles him, she calms him down and tells that her modesty is not ravished. He offers himself to go instead of Sohini to collect bread. So it was Sohini's duty to go and collect bread. Collect bread means here collect food from the people, the rich people. So Sohini used to go for all these days. Now Baka decides that he will be going instead of Sohini, because if Sohini is sent alone, this may happen again, or worse than this may happen again to Sohini. So he stops Sohini. He tells that from now you are not going to collect the bread from these people. It will be Baka who is going to collect the bread. So this is about the treatment to Baka and his sister in the temple. Here we see that though Brahmin, they shout if the untouchable has touched their body, but now when it is the matter of lust, Pandit Kalinath, he himself goes to Sohini and he touches her. So at that time, his caste, his religion, his temple is not polluted. But if these people enter into the temple, if they touch unknowingly, if they do not shout while walking on the streets that scavenger is coming, the sweeper is coming, that is cause for the polluting, but not this. So this question should be asked by all of us. Is this practice correct? In today's session, we saw that Baka, he comes to the temple. He was awestruck by the structure of the temple. He had a desire to get into the temple and see inside. And by that time, he got, unknowingly, he joins his hand, closes his eyes, and the rhythmic chanting of the names of God had made him very religious. He had closed his eyes by that time. He heard somebody shouting polluted, and he was in a confusion who has polluted, whether he or his sister. And then he gets to know from his sister that Pandit Kalinath tried to molest her, and he was very angry on Pandit. He wanted to punish that Brahmin, but by that time Sohini stops him, drags him holding his lapels and brings him out. So we have learned all this today. In the next session, we'll know more about Baka's life. Till then, take care, bye-bye, and thank you.